Okay, so we're sitting here on the ramp at Santa Barbara, and before I call for my clearance, I want to make sure that all my avionics are set up, all the different things like that. Quick word about avionics. The way I use them, I like my COM1 to be what I call air traffic control. That would be tower, departure, center, approach, and Unicom if it's a non-towered airport. My COM2 would be all what I call ground frequencies. In other words, ground control, clearance delivery, ATIS, AWOS, ASOS, things of that nature, or flight service for that matter. Okay, so that's COM1s and COM2s. Okay, NAV1 I have set here, and you notice that I've got Gaviota, and it's the 099 radial off of Gaviota that's going to take me to Quang that I've filed. And I've got my course indicator set to 099. In my standby of my number one radio, I've actually got the ILS frequency for the ILS 7 back into Santa Barbara. If I get in any kind of trouble, any kind of potential emergency, or even anomaly, I might want to return to Santa Barbara, and I'm set up to get right back in if I need to. My NAV2 in the active frequency, I have the San Marcos VOR, and over here in my number 2 nav, I've got it set for the 119 radial, and it's a little off of that, so I'm just going to adjust that there, the 119 radial. And those two radials will define Quang, which is where I file to. In my standby of my number 2 nav, I've got the Fillmore VOR, and I'll be using that to track across once we are headed towards Oxnard and have passed Quang. My DME is set to NAV1, and I'll be using distance and cross radials, regular radials, to figure out where I am. As you fly along, Mindstar Aviation is recording all of this on ForeFlight, and so you'll be able to see where I am on a moving map and using Cloud Ahoy to debrief it all. For me personally, as I'm flying, I will not see any of that. I'm only using my iPad for frequencies and for approach plates, things of that nature. So, okay, I'm all set up to go. I guess I'm ready to call clearance delivery. And good afternoon, Santa Barbara clearance, Mooney 516 Alpha Papa.
Mooney 516 Alpha Papa, Santa Barbara clearance. You cleared to Oxnard Airport. Departure flight runway heading, radar vectors Quang, then as filed. Maintain 3000. Departure frequency 120.55, squawk 5024.
Okay, Mooney 516 Alpha Papa cleared to Oxnard runway heading, direct Quang as filed, 3000, 120.55, squawk 5024.
26 Alpha Papa, read back right.
Thanks, sir. I'm pretty much ready to go, except I've got to listen to the ATIS. Remember, when you call ground for taxi, you want to be sure that you have the ATIS and you let them know. I'll bring the ATIS up, and while I'm waiting on that, okay, so we've got information, Victor. And I'm going to switch over to the ground frequency and just double check my altimeter is set for 2992, which it is. They are using runway 25. I'm ready to call ground control now. Santa Barbara ground, Mooney 516 Alpha Papa, signature ramp taxi with Victor.
Mooney 516 Alpha Papa, Santa Barbara ground, runway 25, taxi via Charlie Juliet.
25 via Charlie Juliet, thanks, sir. Okay, so we're ready to start taxiing. Probably the very first thing I'm going to do before I get going too far is to test my brakes, even though it's a simulator. I'm going to fly this as if it is a real airplane. I'm starting to move. I don't want to get going too fast. I'll bring on my brakes, and yep, they are working. So I'll continue my taxi. We see the Charlie taxiway sign up ahead of me there, turning to the left. And as I start to taxi, I can even do some taxi turns, a turn to the right, double checking my turn coordinator. My HSI, they were both turning. My attitude indicator did not deflect. I'm going to do a turn back to the left. turn coordinator is working, HSI is working, and the attitude indicator remains erect. You might notice if you're new to flying these simulators that taxiing them is not as easy as taxiing an airplane. It's partly because we're really turning it with the rudder rather than with the nose wheel or tail wheel as you might be equipped. Up ahead of us is taxiway Juliet. We'll be turning left on Juliet. While I am taxiing here, I'll also mention that prior to our starting up the engine or starting this recording, I had checked the navs on the ground here. I was able to receive both Gaviota and San Marcos, so I know that those are working. If I had not, at some point I'd want to check my nav radios and make sure that they are working prior to taking off. And we've got a 400-foot overcast. The time to find out that your navs are not working is not when you get in the air. Up ahead is runway 25. We'll be coming to a stop there, and prior to calling tower for our release, we'll make sure that everything is set for our takeoff. Okay, for my takeoff check, I actually have flows, and then I will go to my checklist and make sure that I've gotten everything that I need to get. Checklist usage is critically important because we do forget things, and I'm certainly at the head of the list of forgetting things. So, okay, we'll start off with our frequencies. I've got the tower in. I've got departure in. I've got ground control, the ATIS. I've got Gaviota with the ILS and the standby for that. I've got San Marcos in the number 2. My needles are set there. My heading bug is set for the runway heading. The purpose of this is for several reasons. Number one, once I get out on the runway, it'll tell me that I am on the proper runway. We remember the accident in Lexington. Don't want that to happen. It'll also tell me whether my HSI is correct or not. So if it didn't indicate anything but the actual runway heading, 255 in this case, it would certainly be a no-go. And the last reason is, quite often, our clearances are runway heading, and in this case, that's what we've got. So if I needed to bail out into autopilot, it's set, and it's also there for my reference in my scan as I take off. Okay, so the runway heading bug is set. Next, I've got to get in some flaps. With the Mooney, we use 10-degree or half flaps, and got my flap set, and I'm going to now set my trim. And you might find as you fly these simulators that it's somewhat difficult to get it trimmed. This is true, and it takes a lot of practice, a lot of perseverance on many of them, just little taps of the trim till you get it exactly where you want. I believe my trim is set to yield my best rate climb speed. This is a low-wing airplane. I'm going to need my boost pump on, so I've got my boost pump on. We see it up on my annunciator panel as well. The boost pump's on. We're going to be taking off into rain and clouds anytime I'm in visible moisture. Irrespective of the temperature, I want to have my pitot heat on. And I want to make sure that my cowl flaps are open. They are open. Okay, let me run down my checklist real quick. Freaks and navs, yep, runway heading, bug, flaps, trim, boost pump, pitot heat, cowl flaps open. I'm all set to go. So now change frequencies, and we'll give Santa Barbara Tower a call. And Santa Barbara Tower, Mooney 516 Alpha Papa, ready for departure, IFR Oxnard.
Mooney 516 Alpha, Santa Barbara Tower, runway 25, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, 6 Alpha Papa. Now, as I taxi out, you're going to see that I'm actually going to swing a little to the left. This will give me a little more runway, but it's also going to allow me to get lined up with that center line a little more easily. If you have your simulator set up as I do with the radio stack in the way, these taxi turns to the right can be somewhat difficult to really nail things exactly. As we come around for takeoff, and once I get on the runway, I'm going to do something that I call the HAT check. It stands for heading, altimeter set, and transponder on the proper code. Okay, so here I am on our center line, pretty close to it. I'll double check my heading. Heading bug is centered. I'm on the right runway. My HSI is correct. I've got my transponder set and my altitude is set. I'm going to be coming in with power, the things I want to be aware of. Am I making full manifold pressure? In this case, I should be making very close to 38 inches of manifold pressure. I'll make sure that I have oil pressure, fuel flow. In this case, it should be somewhere in around 22 gallons, 22, 23 gallons. My airspeed alive. Rotation is at 60 knots. I want to be in the air, and I expect to be in the air before runway 33 left. If I'm not in the air at that point, I'll abort the takeoff. If anything happens with runway remaining, even though I'm in the air, I'll abort the takeoff. If I have a problem once I'm into the clouds, I'm going to switch over to the ILS frequency, declare an emergency, and request vectors back in for the ILS 7. So, okay, let's go to Oxnard. Okay, I'm making manifold pressure, I've got oil pressure, I've got fuel flow, 20 gallons an hour, I'll accept that. Waiting for 60 knots, here's 60 knots. I'm going to rotate, going to pitch up about 7 degrees right there, and trim forward if I need to. My nose down just a little bit. I'm on the slow side. Come back to the right just a little bit. Runway heading. Into the clouds. I'm going to go ahead and bring my gear up. My flaps up.
Windy 6 Alpha, contact departure.
Over to departure, 6 Alpha Pop, thanks. Santa Barbara departure, Mooney 516 Alpha Papa airborne, Santa Barbara 1,300 climbing 3,000 runway heading.
Windy 516 Alpha Papa, Santa Barbara departure, radar contact, flight heading 140.
140, 6 Alpha Papa. Watching my pitch attitude as well, it's a little high. I want to be down about 5 degrees. My heading bug's 140. With this bank, half the bank angle in degrees would be the time to roll out, so about 7 degrees ahead of time. About now I go to my attitude indicator, roll to wings level, and I've nailed my heading. My nose is a little high. I'm going to continue to pitch down. I want to be pitched about 5 degrees. I'm going to have to trim for that, so it'll stay there. 5 degrees nose up. Should give me about 100 knots in my cruise climb. My climb checklist. Going through my climb checklist. Gears up, flaps are up. I'm going to take my boost pump off. I'm going to keep my finger there. Nose has come up. Keep my finger there till I confirm fuel pressure, which I have. Power's going to come back down to 35 inches. 2400. 2,500 RPM, 300 feet to go. I'm off my heading, coming back to my heading. Pitch is off, adjusting my pitch. 100 feet to go, doing about 700 feet a minute, so about 70 feet ahead of time. Bring my nose down to the horizon, and I'm going to go ahead and couple up autopilot, heading, altitude, and make sure that the autopilot's grabbed it. Okay, it would appear that it has, so now I'll go ahead and go through my cruise checklist. I'm going to bring my power back down to 32 inches. My RPM to 2,400. I'm going to close my cowl flaps. My CHTs are fine there. And then I'm going to lean to peak TIT, and I know it's a fuel flow of somewhere in around 13.8, 13.9 gallons. So I'm actually going to watch my fuel flow as I lean out, and my TITs as well. There I am, 13.9, and then watching my TITs coming up. It should peak out somewhere right in around 1,600. Level 3,000.
Twenty-six Alpha Papa flighting 090 when I proceed direct Camarillo.
Okay, 090 and direct Camarillo enable, 6 Alpha Papa. So I've changed the frequencies. Now I'll bring my course arrow till the D bar centers. I've got the ID, that's correct. I do have Gaviota in there. I'm sorry, Camarillo. It was 090 and direct Camarillo. So I'm direct Camarillo. I'm going to switch to nav on my autopilot. I've corroborated Camarillo. And now I never finished my cruise checklist, so I've got my power set, 32 inches, 2,400 RPM. My fuel flow is set. I've got peak TIT. Cowl flaps are closed. My CHTs are pretty good. And my gear and flaps are up. I always include those. One time I was going through 14,000 feet when I finally realized I'd left my gear down. So checklists are a good thing. Point Magoo in. Actually, we're out over the water. Let's see if we can get Santa Barbara to give us any higher. And Santa Barbara, Mooney 6 Alpha Pop, might 4,000 be available, sir?
Mooney 6 Alpha Papa, climb maintain 4,000.
Climb maintain 4,000. Think about it, sir. Beautiful. So for my climb, I'll come back to climb power, 35 inches, 2,500 RPM, and I'll open my cowl flaps, open my cowl flaps about halfway open. So where am I? What's next? I'm climbing up to 4,000 feet. Probably want to find out what's going on while I'm climbing. I've got about another little around a minute. I'm going to go ahead and get the ATIS tuned in at Oxnard. find out what's going on with the weather. So we've leveled off here at 4,000 feet. Do another cruise check, power to 32 inches. 2400 RPM. CHTs are good. Close my cowl flaps. And lean back to peak TIT, somewhere in around 13.9 gallons. I'm watching my fuel flow. Watching those TITs come up. Should stop its peak somewhere right in around 1600 Fahrenheit. Hasn't quite peaked. Lean a little more. Appears to be my peak right there. Okay, so where am I? What's next? I'm going to be coming up to Point Mugu approach fairly soon, so I better get their frequency in, 124.7. Should be handed off here anywhere soon. So
R6 Alpha Papa, contact Point Mugu approach 124.7. See ya.
sure enough, Mugu approach now, 124.7. Have a good day. Good afternoon, Mugu. Mooney 516 Alpha Papa 4000, information Quebec, and requesting vectors ILS 25.
Verify we're taking off Papa Point Gear approach to Roger, fly heading is 070 vectors to final.
070 vectors to final, 6 Alpha Pop. So I set my heading bug to 070, put the autopilot back into heading mode. We're in the turn to 070, and I'm not going to do anything until I'm sure that we've captured that heading, so that we don't deviate on off somewhere off heading and get a pilot violation. Okay, it's grabbed 070, so now it's time to brief the approach. We told that we could expect the ILS 25. Things are right down to minimums. It's down to 2 miles and 300 feet, so we're right down to the bottom. We'll go ahead and bring the approach up and start briefing it out. So we start off with the frequency 108.7. Bring that across and we'll identify it. Okay, so we've got that, and we'll set our course indicator to 256. Have our course indicator set. Okay, we've got the ATIS in, 11805. We're speaking to Magoo, Point Magoo approach right now, and our next frequency will be the tower, 134.95. Ground control, 121.9. Okay, we've got those set. I'm now going to change my number 2 nav, and we're going to start tracking across on this heading off of the Fillmore VOR. We'll go ahead and we'll identify that. Find out where we are, probably somewhere in around the 220, maybe 230 radial. There's the 22, there's the 23. Just about the 238 degree radial. I did hear the identifier. Let's make sure it's the right one. Yes, indeed. Okay, we got the right one. And now I'm going to track across using my number 2 nav, and I'm going to go every 10 degrees. I'll advance, or actually in this case, subtract 10 degrees from each heading. So I've set it to 228 here, and I'm going to put my DME remotely to my number 2 nav, telling me my distance from Fillmore. This will be very helpful when it finally comes time as we're tracking across to the localizer. I know the distance from the Fillmore VOR over to Kudak. It's 9.3 miles, and so I'll have a sense of how close I am to the localizer. Haven't checked the engine in a while, so let's check everything there. Fuel pressure is good, oil pressure is good, oil temps are good. Outside air temperature is up, we're pretty warm, no worries about ice. TITs are good, and our CHTs are down nice and cool. They're just a little under 300 degrees. Powers are set fine. Where are we? What's next? Going through a little bit of air here. Autopilot didn't hold that very well. Climbed up about 60 feet, but autopilot's bringing it back down. So I briefed my approach. Now the missed approach is climbed to 520 feet, climbing left turn to 2000 on the Camarillo VOR DME radial 249 to squid and hold. I have filed Burbank as my alternate, and so I probably want to get set. If I have to miss at Oxnard, I'll be going to Burbank, and I know that there's an approach starting at the Ventura VOR, so I'm going to tune in, or at least set in the standby the Ventura VOR frequency of 108.2. Just in case I have to go missed, ready to go there. I'm 15 miles from Fillmore. I still haven't gotten to the 228 radial from Fillmore. I'll be a beam Nelly. We'll see if you look at your approach plate that the 198 radial from Fillmore goes to Nelly. Of course, we're offset here, so somewhere around the 208 radial indicated in my number 2 will probably have us a beam Nelly. I know I'm going to get a turn, quite possibly 160, the 90-degree turn. That's typically what we get, a base leg turn. At that point, I'll bring my power back down to 24 inches, which will slow me below my gear speed of 140. Once I'm below gear speed, I'll drop my gear. That'll slow me down to around 110, which is my flap speed, which I'll do as I intercept the glide slope. What else can I be doing? Well, maybe check the ATIS. It hasn't been all that long, but weather is changing. Let's just see if the ATIS has changed. I have to question that no clouds below 20,000 because before we left Santa Barbara, they were right down at 400 feet. And looking out the window, we're over a layer, so we'll see what we get, but I'm prepared for the worst case scenario. I might have to go mist. We'll see how low those clouds really are. We'll find out what the ceilings really are. I see that we're coming up to the 228 radial off of Fillmore, and our distance from Fillmore is 9.7 miles. As I'm coming up there, I'll go ahead and set my OBS for the 208. I'm sorry, 218. And we're slowly coming along, and we're still on the Oxnard side of Nellie. We haven't quite passed Nellie, our final approach fix. Briefing the approach again. What can I put in that I haven't missed? I've got the frequency, I've identified it, I've got the course indicator set, my ATIS is set, we can continue to monitor that. I'm speaking with Magoo, I got the tower in, I've got ground in, looking at the lateral plans, I see the radials and coming across, forgot about, there's an outer marker at Pards. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my marker beacon for Pards. We cross Pards at 1680, we cross Nellie at 3,200. You cannot brief the approach plate enough times. As they say about voting, briefing approach is the same thing. Brief early, brief often. We just can't do it enough. We notice the needle's moving faster on our number 2 nav, and that's because we're getting closer and closer to Fillmore as we fly past it. In fact, right now we're only 5 miles away from it. I'm going to go ahead and advance again to the 208 radial. And that should be, as we cross that, we should be just about a beam Nellie at that point. I do notice that our glide path has showed up, and it is slowly rising up, which is a good thing. If they were to turn me now, we'd probably have a hard time catching that glide slope before we turned in. And there's a 208. I'll go ahead to the 198. We're just about a beam Nellie right now.
For 516 Alpha Papa, turn right heading 150.
150, 6 Alpha Pop. No, we're getting to turn a little early. Okay. Hey, so I'm turning to heading a 150, and I'm going to bring my power back down to 24 inches. Should slow me down below 140 knots. And that'll allow me to lower my gear, which will then slow me down to below 110, and I can get my flaps on. Watching my airspeed. There I am below 140. I'll put my gear down. I'm going to advance my number 2 OBS back out to the 198, so I'll be able to identify Nellie crossing 3,200 if I am on the glide path. I'm 3.9 miles from the Fillmore VOR. I know that I should run into the localizer somewhere in between 8 or 9 miles, maybe 10 miles at this point because we're offset. We're not exactly on the 163. Got the tower in, that's ready to go. My marker beacon's turned on. Next turn should be 220. Waiting for it at any moment now. We're 5.7 miles from Fillmore. Should intercept the localizer somewhere in between 9 and 10 miles.
For 516 Alpha Papa, 4 miles from Hoopla, fly heading 220, maintain 4,000 till established on the localizer, cleared ILS runway 25 approach.
Okay, 220 till established, maintain 4,000 till established, and cleared ILS 25. Thank you, sir. There it is. And as we start to intercept the localizer, I'm going to turn off the autopilot and hand fly this the rest of the way. Here we are, we're on our intercept heading. We're 7.3 miles from Fillmore. The glide path is still up at the top. It hasn't started to move. It's not alive. The localizer is not alive. I'm waiting for them both. Speed is right in around 90 knots, so that'll be fine for my getting my flaps down. Landing checklist will come inside of Nelly. I'll complete those once I'm inside Nelly. I've got the tower in. Just waiting now. We're 8.1 miles from Fillmore. I'm expecting that localizer to come alive pretty soon. The glide slope is alive. I can't start down on the glide slope until I have a minimum of 3/4 scale deflection on my D-bar. I need at least 3/4 scale deflection in order to start on down the localizer. That is what determines being established. 8.5 miles from Fillmore. The glide path is alive. Still waiting for the localizer. There it is. Localizer's alive. I'm going to disconnect the autopilot and be hand flying from here on in. I'm going to maintain 4,000 feet. And the way I track the localizer is across with these King HSIs, it's great. I can put my lubber line right on the D-bar and now start my turn and just keep the lubber line right on the D-bar, maintaining 4,000. That's a pitch thing. I'm still below the glide path, turning a little too steeply. I'm going to have to roll out here. I went a little too steep on that. Holding my altitude. I'm not descending because I want to wait until the glide path. Glide path I'll configure with flaps, and then I'll be stabilized from that point in, rather than descending to 3,700 down to Hoopla, maintaining this altitude. Okay, slowly coming up to the localizer. It looks like we're going to hit the localizer and the glide slope just about the same time. Just slightly right of the localizer. Stop my turn. Just waiting for the glide path. I'll deploy half flaps and reduce my power down to 20 inches. Should yield about 90 knots in my descent. I'm a little slow right now. I'm not going to fixate on it. If I have time, I'll sync my heading bug for a reference heading. There's glide path. I'm going to deploy half flaps. I've gone to the left, come back to my heading bug, bring my power down to 20 inches, and pitching down on my attitude indicator to about the center of the horizon bar. I've gone over to the right side of the heading bug for now as a reference to bring that D-bar back in. I'm going to have to trim down. I need my nose right about in the center of that horizon bar. Stay on the glide path. Tower should be passing me off to Nelly. They're supposed to do it at least 2 miles from the final fix. Process of trimming down. At this speed, I should have about just a little less than 500 foot a minute descent rate. I'm having to
For 516 Papa, contact Oxnard Tower 134.905. Good day.
Tower now, 134.95. Have a good one. Good afternoon, Oxnard Tower, Mooney 516 Alpha Papa, just coming up on Nelly, sir.
2516 Alpha Papa, Oxnard Tower, Roy 25, Little Land.
Clear to land 256 Alpha Papa, thanks. If everything is right, 3,200 at Nelly, slightly left of the D-bar. I'm going to come back to the center of the heading bug, see how that works. Pretty much right on the glide path. Speed is good, 90 knots. Here's 3,000, there's Nelly. I'm going to start the time on the timer on my yoke. It should be about 6.5 minutes if we have to convert to localizer. If we do have to convert to localizer, we'll probably have to go mist because the localizer minimums are much higher than the 300-foot ceilings we're expecting. On the localizer, on the glide path, continuing on down. Next call out Pards. We should cross Pards, getting the outer marker at 1,680 feet. Note a little high, got to trim down just a little bit. Speed's still good. Descent rate's okay. On glide path, on localizer, got my reference heading set for that. Our minimum's 300 feet. We're inside Nelly. Let's talk about landing checklist. Gas, so I'm going to switch tanks and get my boost pump on. That's the gas. Undercarriage, I got a green light for my gear. Might as well go ahead and get my mixture and prop. And my landing checklists are complete. That's the GUMPS check. I will check them again several times before we get to the runway. Going just very slightly right of the D-bar. Come back just halfway across the heading bug. And a little above the glide slope. I'm going to push down again, just maybe to the bottom of the horizon bar and retrim. Speed is good. On the localizer, on the glide path. Well, so much for no clouds below 20,000 feet. We're in them here. Slightly above the glide slope. Again, a push. We fly glide slope with pitch, airspeed with power. Speed is good. It's a little fast. I'm not going to fixate on it. Going a little left of course. I'm going to come back to the right half of the heading bug and see if that corrects. A little above the glide path. Pushing down just to the bottom of the horizon line and retrimming. Coming back into the approach course, to the localizer. D-bar is centered, slightly above glide path. Going to trim down some more. Speed is good. Speed's a little fast. I'm going to bring my power down just about a half an inch, 19 inches. On the D-bar, slightly above glide path. Notice how my nose came up. I've got to push it back down. Very difficult to trim these. You think you've got it trimmed and then it runs away from you. Little taps, little taps. On the localizer, slightly above glide path. Coming up on 1680, we should be hearing the outer marker as we cross Pards. We're pretty much right on the glide path, just a smidgen above it. On the localizer, on glide path, going to 300 feet. There's outer marker, 1680. We're pretty good. We've got the proper glide slope. It's not a reflected one. Continuing on down. Going down to 300 feet are the minimums. Missed approach. Climbing left turn to 2,000 and join the 249 off of Camarillo. We've got Camarillo set in the standby if we need it. On the glide path, on the localizer. Slightly below glide path. Just gonna pull that nose up just the top of the horizon bar. Just the top of the horizon bar, a little tap of trim. 1,000 feet to go on the localizer, on the glide path. Speed is fast. We'll bring our power down another inch. On localizer, on glide path. Gas, undercarriage, mixture prop, landing checklist complete. I'm going to come back to the center of the heading bug before that D-bar moves for my reference heading. I'm going a little below the glide path, pull my nose up just to the top of the horizon bar, a little tap of trim. We're coming down the sugar cone. Everything is getting narrower and narrower and requires smaller and smaller corrections. Still below the glide path, a retrim perhaps up, bringing my nose up just to the top of the horizon bar. D-bar is going slightly left. I'll come over just halfway across the heading bug, right there. Stop the turn. Attitude indicator still below the glide path. Bring that nose up about a degree. Here we are back on it. It won't take long to go right through it and be above it. Here we are on it. Back on the localizer, off the reference heading. Come back to the reference heading. Small changes. Nose had dropped. Trim isn't good. We've got 300 feet to go, a little below the glide path, on the localizer, coming back up to the glide path. Speed is good. Still going below glide path, a little bit of nose up trim. On the localizer, going slightly left, a small correction, just 2 degrees. Nose up, a degree. We're right there, no more than that. On the glide path, on the localizer, 200 feet to go. Don't see anything. Prepared for the mist. Climbing left turn to 2,000, going below the glide path. Pull that nose up. There it is. On a localizer, below glide path, coming to 300 feet. Still below the glide path. There's the runway. Isn't that good to see? I'm still going to work the gauges coming on down. I see 4 red. I'm below the glide path on the glide slope. Bringing our nose up. There's inner marker. Still below glide path. Shame on me. So much for no clouds below 20,000. Here I am back at the glide path. Still shows me below on the Pappy, coming down the runway. Sometimes you get lucky. Get on some brakes. No hurry to get flaps up, anything like that. Notice that I only landed with half flaps. I didn't want to destabilize everything on short approach, especially when you break out this close to the runway. Okay, we're off the runway checks. We'll turn our boost pump off. We'll turn our pitot heat off. Never close the cowl flaps. Back up. We'll go ahead and open them. Shame on me.
26 Alpha
And
Papa,
looking for
taxi,
ground ups.
parking the Foxtrot, and this frequency have a
And taxi to the FBO.
Okay,
Flaps
to parking via Foxtrot with you, 6 Alpha Pop. Thanks.
Helps if we
Mercedes.
go the other up.